What do American Greetings, Swagelok, and Lubrizol all have in common? Each chose Northeast Ohio as home to its headquarters. Of course, they're not alone. Over 500 companies of all sizes are headquartered in Northeast Ohio. From relatively young companies like Alaris International to those that have been around since the late 19th century, like the Goodyear Tire and Rubber Company, Northeast Ohio is home to 19 Fortune 1000 companies. Companies like Progressive Insurance, Parker Hannifin, Sherwin-Williams, Poly One, Key Corp, and if you're interested in something sweeter, the J.M. Smucker Company. Whether you're part of one of these businesses or any other, as a business professional, you have ideas, goals, opportunities, or challenges that concern you, and you are not alone. A 2014 survey conducted by PricewaterhouseCoopers reached over 1,300 CEOs from 68 countries. The report found CEOs to be optimistic about the next 5 years despite facing a variety of transformational drivers. The CEOs identified 6 areas that present both challenges and opportunities for growth and success of their business. Let's start by looking at one of them, digital transformation. 86% of the CEOs cited technological advances as the global trend that will most transform business, including both core innovations and IT developments. No matter their industry, they said that all companies must think like technology companies to succeed. The central challenge here is that an emerging rival is no longer a well-understood competitor, but a fundamental evolution of the economics of the business. While product and service innovation determine what many of these business models look like, social commerce, crowdfunding, and incubators bring disruptive change to business models. Many CEOs are now paying more attention to the complex interplay between customer demand, talent, innovations, technology, and the cost of business. Analyzing and understanding the data behind the business helps to increase productivity, drive customer engagement, and enhance the bottom line. Joint ventures and business alliances are becoming more prevalent as businesses seek new ways of collaboration. The benefit is accelerated growth and faster innovation. The right alliance can bring increased exposure and spread out the financial impact of transforming business practices. When it comes to connecting with customers, data intelligence has helped grow business and understand and retain customers. The next phase is all about optimizing behaviors. Understanding how and why customers interact with your products requires a relationship. Social media allows brands to talk directly to their customers and respond in near real time to product and service issues around the globe. Focusing on their staff, 62% of CEOs plan to increase their headcount in 2014. Addressing the skills shortage is as much about taking a fresh look at their current talent as it is looking at fresh talent. Giving current employees the opportunity to grow their skills through continuing education can allow businesses to fill skill gaps without the extra expense of hiring new employees. So what transformational challenges concern you as a business professional? Today we have 5 doctors of business to answer your most pressing concerns. Meet Richard Boyatzis. He's the creator and developer of the work behind emotional intelligence and intentional change theory. Boyatzis is a former CEO of McBurr & Company and an international best-selling author on leadership with books in 28 languages. Demand for Boyatzis' approach to leadership and management is so large that over 400,000 students across 23 countries have signed up for his current online lectures. In 2014, Boyatzis once again made number 9 on HR Magazine's list of the world's most influential thinkers. Many CEOs said urbanization would transform their business in the next 5 years. Population shifts affect business, and if housing is not made affordable, developers, investors, and financial institutions may all miss out. Urban economist Robin Dubin joins us as her focus has been on the impact of geographic space on economic interactions. She is currently working on saving our older cities and slowing the outward march of suburban development. Startups, entrepreneurship, crowdfunding, do those excite you? Well, you better believe they excite Scott Shane. An angel investor and member of the North Coast Angel Fund, Shane was the 2009 winner of the Global Award for Entrepreneurship Research, the most prestigious award in the academic field of entrepreneurship. He has written or edited 11 books and published over 60 articles on entrepreneurship and innovation management. Get your questions ready for this one. J.B. Silvers consults many in the rapidly growing and changing healthcare sector. A former CEO of a health insurance company, Silvers has also served as advisor to Congress in several U.S. states, and most recently as a member of the board and treasurer of the Joint Commission. This group accredits and measures the quality of more than 20,000 healthcare providers worldwide. Silvers' work in financial management and health services impact medical decision-making, insurance plans, pharmaceutical companies, medical device manufacturers, and healthcare policy. As 62% of U.S. CEOs are remaking their operations, they may want to talk to George Varaktarakis. His interests include project management, international operations management, lean operations, operations scheduling, and workforce planning. He has studied manufacturing companies from Milwaukee to as far away as Hong Kong. He also discovered the value of information exchange and the magnitude of production savings due to coordination. His findings often reduce companies' production costs by 30% while improving service. Now, live on stage, here are your doctors of business. We're so glad that you're here and just excited to welcome all of you. We've got a fantastic audience here, and we know some of you have come from the hometown area, and some of you have come from very far away. So we want to extend a special welcome to everyone that's here, with especially warm welcome to those of you who are here visiting CASE and visiting the Weatherhead School for the first time. So our prospective students are coming from really all over the world. We've got a number that come from the great state of Ohio, right? So there's a lot of Buckeyes in the room, which is terrific. Feel free to yell out if this is moving you. We've got a number coming from all over the United States, from Michigan to Florida, from California to North Carolina. So that's fantastic. And then we have some special guests from Latin America here, from Argentina, from Colombia, and from Peru. So just a round of applause and a welcome to everybody. I'm Ellen Van Osten. I'm a faculty member in our organization behavior department and also in executive education. I'm also an executive coach for the Weatherhead School. I've had really the honor of being connected to the school for the past 20 years. I started at a very, very young age, under 10, I think, something like that. And over the course of the past 20 years, I've had a chance to really sit in a variety of different roles, including as an MBA student. So I graduated with my MBA in 1994 from the part-time program. And since that point in time, my Weatherhead degree really had opened up all sorts of opportunities for personal and professional growth that I really could never have forecasted, until the point even most recently where I've had an opportunity to come back and teach with some of the faculty that really made an imprint on my life, and also to teach some of the concepts and courses that really were transformational. So this opportunity to get to know you and to be here this weekend is one that brings me a lot of joy. And I'm going to have an opportunity to be with you tomorrow morning to give you a glimpse of one of those favorite classes of mine and a flagship course in our MBA program, which we call LEAD. So more on that later. But for now, I wanted to have you help me welcome our doctors of business, who you had a chance to learn a little bit about in the video. These are people that I am really proud to call my colleagues, and who are just amazing scholars, authors, educators, and mentors. So without further ado, let me welcome and ask you to join me on stage Scott Shane. Hey, Scott. Yeah, good to see you. Richard Boyatzis. Robin Dubin. J.B. Silvers. And George Varaktarakis. So our panelists are here to share insight on some of the most pressing kind of business challenges and opportunities of our century, really, as they relate to you, business professionals and aspiring students of business. And by the way, we consider all of us to be aspiring business students of business, because it really is kind of an ongoing effort in art, right? In art and science that really stimulates all of us in our research and thinking. So what we've designed here is a chance for you to have an opportunity to interact with some of the great minds and great faculty at the Weatherhead School. And so we're going to do this in a very interactive way. And I know some of you already had given us a couple of questions, so I have those with me. And then we also do have microphones that we're going to be available to take some questions that might be coming to you as we go through today's session. Okay? All right, so let's go ahead and get started. So I'm going to join you guys here. All right, so let me start with a question from Patrick Glicker. Patrick, are you here? Are you with? Yeah, right. Thank you for the question, Patrick. So he is curious about the following. So the 2014 U.S. CEO survey cites that 86% of U.S. CEOs believe advances in technology will transform their business over the next 5 years. However, 70% are concerned about the availability of people who have skills to leverage technology. How do we reconcile the gap between skills in the workforce and targets for technological advancement? Who wants to start us off on that?
That's you.
That's right. George, I don't know, you're being nominated. Do you want to take a stab at it?
Even if you look at the technology, the new technology that will come up, there are already technologies that we teach in our programs that businesses are slow to adopt. For instance, everybody does projects. Everybody manages projects. How many MBA programs offer project management in their curriculum? And how many of those people who have the word project in their title have training in their MBA on project management? So yes, we will do our part to get the greatest leaders out there with the best training, and whatever technology hits them during their lifetime, we will make sure to make them ready for it.
So project management is one of the most important skills and capabilities then.
If you ask me, the alpha and the omega in life.
Yeah, the end all and the be all of
I am
business life,
originally
right?
Greek, so.
And George is our operations professor, so now you know, right? Thank you, George. How about anybody else?
I think the bigger issue is in higher management being able to use the technology rather than entry-level people.
Okay.
People grown up with this, they're pretty good at it when they come out of school. So we need to, the whole organization needs to be aware of what's the capability.
So I think, just building on what JB said, the biggest problem is adaptability. And once somebody passes the ripe old age of, 25, 26, you start to get set in certain patterns and ways of thinking. The more successful you are, the more you get entrapped in thinking, in believing your own legend, and thinking that you're actually doing the right thing. That means that when an organization or a business unit faces a challenge in the marketplace, they have a hard time innovating. I mean, I was president of an industry association in the consulting industry for a number of years, and I can assure you that consulting companies do not innovate. If any of you work for the Price Waterhouse, the Accentures of the world, McKinsey's, they don't innovate. The only way they get some new products or services is they buy them. They buy small companies and then incorporate them. Why don't they innovate? Because an awful lot of organizations are so busy with their concepts like billable rate or the goals that they set that they put blinders on. And it blocks them from being able to adapt to new technologies, to things that now we have to call disruptive innovations because we haven't found a way to say, duh, open your eyes.
So building on that, we have another question that kind of ties with this so we can continue our conversation. This comes from Michael Baer. Michael. All right, thank you for the question. How do you stay ahead of the curve when it comes to technology continually advancing at a fast pace? So this idea of adaptability and some of the just issues that both of you have raised, how does an organization, how do we as individual professionals continue to stay ahead?
Continuing education is part of the business we are in. And this event today shows that keeping a close relationship with our alums is of mutual benefit. So whatever new methodologies are coming up, the Weatherhead School will be in the game, and our alums will be able to share.
We're well prepared, right? That's excellent. Here's another question. What type of opportunities might businesses realize to benefit the underserved areas like Cleveland as a result of urbanization in the surrounding areas such as downtown Cleveland and University Circle? This is a question from Shakira Johnson. So thank you, Shakira. Robin, this might be one that you could lead us off on.
Sure. Okay. So I think when a firm locates, it actually has an impact on people outside of the firm. So, mostly, in accounting, we think about how a change is going to affect the firm. In HR, we think about how a change is going to affect the firm. In finance, how a change is going to affect the firm. But location is different because location affects the firm, but it also affects people outside the firm. So, for example, most of firms these days tend to locate in suburban locations. And what does that do? Well, it has a number of different effects. First of all, it makes it very difficult for somebody who doesn't have a car and who lives closer to downtown than this location to get out to where this firm is locating. And so when you locate out there, you're cutting off part of your labor force and possibly part of your customer base by making it more difficult for them to get out there. But the bigger effect, and the one that concerns me the most probably, is as we build on the periphery, we're pulling the city out. There's this force that's pulling the city out and out and out. And because there's more area on the outside of a circle than the inside of a circle, that's causing kind of a vacuum to happen in the center because you've got the same amount of space and you're vacating the center. And what that does, did you ever fly in a plane and look out the window and you see these little lakes? And they're like these curved little lakes. And you think, well, how did they get there? Well, there used to be a river that connected all those little lakes. But what happens is that over time, the river starts to bend more and more and more, and eventually it can't hold anymore. And the little lakes break off and the river disappears. And that's kind of what's happening as we put all this pressure on the city, on the outskirts of the city. I think eventually the center won't hold anymore. And we'll just have these little isolated islands of economic activity, but we'll have lost this vitality that comes from having a big metropolitan area. So there are a lot of what we call in economics external effects of location.
Great, thank you. Anybody?
Yeah, a follow-up. So with Cleveland and our media telling us that everyone and their sister wants to live downtown all of a sudden, as our businesses leave the center and
because we want to catch it up. If you weren't from Cleveland Heights, I would be frustrated. Everybody ready?
Yes.
So with Cleveland and everyone and their brother trying to live downtown all of a sudden.
Somebody just asked that question.
We got it in front of me. With everyone trying to live downtown all of a sudden, is it possible that our cities could start to become cultural centers in much the same way that a European city is versus the more traditional American model of being a business center? Is that more of a direction that makes sense?
Well, certainly that could happen, and that would be very nice. But what I see happening in Cleveland is there's a lot of focus on downtown. There's a lot of public money going into subsidized development downtown, but the surrounding neighborhoods are being neglected. And that's really where the vacuum is. So you have a lot of activity, and it's very nice, and it's wonderful downtown, but then you kind of have this vacuum surrounding it. You have activity around the clinic and University Circle.
It's not really a threat in the major metropolitan areas that have a lot of different neighborhoods. Chicago's, San Francisco's, Boston, Philadelphia, Washington, because their neighborhoods create a lot of small businesses and people live there as well as work there. And you don't get the same force going on. It's the medium-sized cities like Cleveland that are more at risk for this dynamic.
And particularly because the population is not growing. And so anything new kind of displaces something old. And that's really the problem that we have. And so what I think Cleveland needs to do is to somehow turn that outward pressure back in towards the center. And they can do that, and they have, by subsidizing this development downtown, but it can't end there. We have to work on this surrounding area to make it hold, because otherwise you have nice and then nothing and then nice again.
You don't mind if we continue on this? Because University Circle is a positive example. You know, when Wade and Rockefeller and the others created it, you know, 1915-ish, the idea was to have a suburb that would be a cultural center. Well, now we're a part of the city, and yet it's because of University Circle's work and Case developing things like the Uptown complex. Now we have a supermarket, we've got a set of restaurants, not just bars, and it's actually becoming a place where people, not today because it's a little cold, but normally people can congregate from all sorts of places. We saw the same thing starting to happen in Tremont. This could be examples of some neighborhoods that start to get created that have a stability unto themselves.
So did you have a follow-up comment?
Just on a personal note, is Cleveland Heights, which is where I was foolish enough to buy a house, is that going to be one of those areas that
Yeah.
the opportunity corridor?
Well, I happen to live in Cleveland Heights myself, and I love Cleveland Heights.
You don't? Oh, the rest of us do. Yeah, you used to. You used to. Right.
Well, Cleveland Heights is in danger because as this kind of dead zone expands, it's going to hit the inner ring suburbs first, and it's already starting to hit the inner ring suburbs, and Cleveland Heights is one of those. So it's in the suburbs' interest to stop this outward pull and to turn it around, and then they won't be in danger anymore.
I think if we expand the business base in the center, Cleveland will gain a better reputation in the US, and the population will increase. And then you will be able to sell the same house double the price. So I believe that this transformation will eventually benefit all of us. If the investment was in the suburbs, the image of Cleveland in the US wouldn't have improved with the rapidity that is happening, and I hope it will be happening in the next 20 years. With this line of thinking, I think we are doing the best we can for our city.
Thank you. Let me just make a comment. Thank you for all of your adaptability and willingness to kind of work with us. We are streaming this live on WebEx, so it does help when you speak into the microphone for us so we can make sure we can pick up all the audio. And speaking of WebEx, some of you may notice that we have some guests that have joined us on the screen behind me. And so I wanted to extend a special welcome to a couple of alumni who are here participating in our conversation as well. Hello, gentlemen. How are you? We have Dr. Diego Grauman. And Dr. Grauman is an MBA graduate from 2005. He is currently general manager of Novartis Oncology in Peru and Ecuador. So we're happy to have you with us. And we also have Mike Chapman. Mike is an MBA graduate from the year 2000. He's managing director and partner at Accenture in the strategy, communications, media, and technology practice. So we're happy to have you join us. I just wanted to give you an opportunity to say a little bit about maybe your work, and if you have a comment on anything we've talked about so far. Mike, did you want to go first?
Sure. Well, thank you for the opportunity, and I'm encouraged to see the potential candidates and students there at the meeting learning more about Weatherhead. I'll tell you, I had a tremendous experience at Weatherhead, and I wouldn't be in my position at Accenture Strategy if I hadn't gone through the Weatherhead experience. In terms of my personal experience with Weatherhead, I'll tell you what was most critical for me in terms of my learning and in terms of what I took away from the program was really the case-based instructional process. So when you think about what we do in strategy consulting, a lot of it is solving very complex and unstructured business problems for our clients. And the Weatherhead approach to that in terms of going through case-based instruction, working in teams, using data and analytics to come back with fact-based recommendations is very similar to what we do here on a daily basis at Accenture in terms of strategy consulting. So I thoroughly enjoyed the learning from the instructors that I had at the time, looking at some of the research that the professors were working on in terms of learning about where industry trends are going, and utilizing the frameworks that I learned at Weatherhead to help me in my career as a strategy consultant. So thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mike. Diego, welcome.
Thank you. First of all, same as Mike, I really want to like to meet everyone there and really congratulate everyone already being at Weatherhead. Weatherhead was a great experience for me. Everything I pretty much been doing during the last 10 years, I would say, has a huge reason why I came where I am because of Weatherhead. The main one, as you mentioned, I'm a physician, been a practicing physician when I entered Weatherhead. So everything that I became, I would say that the first seats came in the Weatherhead School of Management. Pretty much what I would say is like the business mind, having all the networking skills and everything put me where I am today. I think that for everyone there and everything that was said, it's not only about the technical thing, but also some things that we need to talk about more than technology and about everything else. And I wanted to add on that is about people. Everything that I did on the stairs to come to a general manager has to be about managing people. How do you work on relations, teamwork, and all the team building things that I actually learned during my time at Weatherhead, and that I've been completely learning more and adding more each of the years I've been working on in different companies. Thank you to Weatherhead and the Career Center, I got my first job at Johnson & Johnson, where I've been working and having relations with it and increasing my level of responsibilities until what I am today in the market. So I really would say that it's not everything about technical and technology, but it's also about people.
Terrific. Thank you for being with us. And as you come up with questions or they arise in your mind, feel free to direct them to one of our alums as well, in addition to all of our panel's members. So I know there was a couple of hands that were ready to go up. And so we wanted to give an opportunity for some of the questions from the audience. So I have one over here. You have a microphone already? Thanks.
Hello, my name is Nicholas, and I'm going to go ahead and preface this question with, I work at Mount Sinai, and I work on clinical as well as basic science research there for cancer. Mm-hmm. We focus mainly on melanoma and breast cancer. And my question is, according to the World Health Organization, America's GDP is just south of 20% towards healthcare. And this question is directed towards Dr. Silvers. I'm wondering is, where is that going to leave us when this bubble pops? I mean, we are increasing life, with pharmaceuticals, which is a great thing. But I mean, in the end, though, it's costing on Medicare, it's costing on Medicaid, and overall, it's costing on the American taxpayer. And eventually, that bubble is going to increase and increase and increase. And when that does pop, because eventually we can't keep going up, well, where's that going to leave us?
Thank you.
Well, the first premise is it's a bubble and it's going to pop. As being in that business, you sort of hope that doesn't happen. They're bubbles that are based on speculation, based on excess enthusiasm, based on fraud, some of the 2008 issues that we might have in finance. This growth is based on some market imperfections, I grant you, that are driving it, but mostly based on value. The pharmaceutical industry, in spite of the ridiculously high prices they charge, most of the data shows that the return on investment has been pretty good. We've lowered the rate of hospitalizations. We substitute outpatient for inpatient. We've done a lot of really good things. If we look at one segment of healthcare by itself, it looks out of bounds. We have to look at the whole thing. And we haven't done a very good job of doing that. Accountable care organizations, capitation arrangements, things that are looking at broader schema of that sort, tend to break that down. So now healthcare managers are having to look across the whole spectrum. So folks at all the big systems now are tremendously worried, where they never were before, with what happens after they leave the hospital. When you get that total knee, where do you go for rehab? What happens? Do you follow your regimen, and do you get readmitted, or do you have a bad outcome? Those value measures are in the process of changing the industry. So just in the last 3 or 4 years, I see some huge changes in the way that people are organizing the healthcare and the way they're applying things. And we were just talking in the beginning about the use of data, about entrepreneurial use of data to come up with whole new ways. This gets back to Scott maybe, whole new ways of delivering healthcare that we never thought of before. Nobody ever asked that question, because we went to my local doc, they referred up the chain, I got admitted, I did what I was going to do, and then I left. I can cut that whole, it's a value chain process. I can cut that whole chain out. And my wife just had major surgery in her foot. It would have been a 2-week inpatient stay. She was in and out in 3 hours, and now is in rehabilitation. Tremendously important improvement. So I think process improvement moves us down the chain. Innovation and new entrants in a dynamic marketplace move us down a really interesting path that opens up all kinds of opportunities for business people, but for professional people, lets us do things the way we've never done it before, and that's all to the good. So I'm optimistic, to answer your question. I'm not pessimistic.
Yeah, I'm very optimistic as well, and I noticed a pattern in a lot of the questions about whether what's going on in downtown Cleveland, or what's happening with technological change, or what's happening with healthcare. And the common theme is there's some sort of change. We don't like change. We're headed down a bad road. What we forget is that people are very adaptive, and they come up with solutions. And when problems get bad, that's when they come up with the solution, because without the problem being bad, there's no motivation for the solution. So when healthcare starts to rise as a percentage of GDP, there's a lot of pressure to come up with solutions that lower healthcare costs, which will spur a lot of innovation. When things get bad in downtown Cleveland, right, that's when you start to see the little startup companies moving to downtown Cleveland, because everything's so cheap there. In fact, when I go visit companies that are looking for financing or looking for advice or whatever it may be, that's where I'm going. I'm not going to Independence, not going to the outer suburbs anymore. You're going into Cleveland. So I think there's a common theme on all of this, which is when there become big problems, people have an incentive to solve them, and that's when they come up with the really good entrepreneurial ideas. And healthcare is a big portion of the economy, so as things get worse in terms of cost, there'll be a lot of smart people solving those problems.
I also think from a behavioral perspective, in terms of change, we are seeing, and have for about the past 15 or 20 years, the beginning of dramatic lifestyle changes. So folks your age today assume that you go to a health club or you work out regularly. I mean, When I was in college, if somebody went to a gym to work out 3 times a week, we called them a fanatic. But today, taking care of yourself preemptively is considered an important issue. Toby Cosgrove, who's our, the CEO of the Cleveland Clinic, said at a meeting with our EMBAs not too long ago that if we could get everybody to stop smoking, everybody to reduce their weight, and everybody to exercise more, we could dramatically drop the cost of healthcare. And he's not talking about reducing it 20%. He means reducing it to 20% of the current costs. So one issue is we are beginning to see what could be a dramatic change in what causes illnesses. I work at the medical school on neurodegenerative disorders. And the reason I'm there, I guess I'm not a neurologist, but techniques we've been pioneering at Weatherhead are thought to hold promise for delay of onset of neurodegenerative disorders. So we're trying to think about how can we get more 20 and 30 and 40-year-olds to regularly practice the kind of activities, if you're in the Weatherhead MBA program, you're going to learn and practice. Because if we can do that, then people won't be suffering from some of these dementia, Alzheimer's, et cetera. And instead of starting to get the symptoms in their late 50s or 60s, it might not happen until their 90s. So lifestyle changes, I think, could be a big difference. The second thing is the disruptive innovations. I remember talking to Toby a couple, 2 summers ago about my MOOC. And the fact that we launched it, I didn't know if it was going to go well. And in the first run, 110,000 people signed up. And by the way, the video said 20 countries. It's 215 countries. But when I was talking to him about that, he said, well, do you know for higher education, the MOOCs are an opening to alternate pedagogy. He said for us, it's the urgent care health centers. And a few months later, I had the opportunity, because I broke my ankle jumping on stage giving a speech in Kentucky, to go to an urgent care health center. And for a total of $258.
You need therapy, actually, on this one.
Yeah, right. For a total of $258, I got the x-rays, I got the boot, I got the initial medicine. I was taken care of till I could get back and see the orthopedic surgeon. If I had gone to the emergency room of the local general hospital, it would cost me $3,000 or $4,000, and I still would have had the same thing. So his point is that the urgent care centers are going to replace the hospitals and what used to be large doctor-based private practices for an alternate distribution system. That also can dramatically drop the cost of healthcare. I mean, if we can get fewer people to go to emergency rooms and more people to go to these healthcare centers, if you're coughing and you've got bronchitis and you need amoxicillin, that's going to save a lot of money.
You might have comments on that. The percentage of our income that goes to different categories changes over the centuries and decades. So what we spend on housing is much lower, or food, or whatever. The same thing with healthcare. I don't think this 20% is a big issue.
Nicholas, I hope you are right, and there is a bubble, and it bursts, because when this happens, as my colleagues alluded to, people come to operations.
George is always worried about job security.
Yeah. So healthcare today operates within an equation that we have a cost, we add 30% margin, and that's how much you have to pay. So if my cost doubles, my margin will double, you will pay more. They don't care. This is precisely how automobile manufacturing worked in the 1950s, and TV production and everything else, market shares which we lost to Japanese. At some point after the bubble, the customer will set the price, and your margin will be maximized by reducing your cost, which means you're going to come to operations to optimize your operations. What is very well known in manufacturing, lean operations, healthcare became aware about 10 years ago, and they all know that they need to apply lean operations in the organization, but very few places actively apply the principles of lean operations. And the reason is that because here there is a very interesting interplay between technology and operations. So the healthcare technology changes very rapidly. So whatever process you might have in place, 2 years later, you're going to change your machines. You're going to be operating with the previous process. You need business process reengineering more rapidly than you do in any other business. We'll make you prepared for all of that.
So,
Mother science.
a question over here.
Hello.
Oh, there we go. Thank you.
They gave me the microphone. So that was their
Excellent.
fault.
It's all yours.
Sam Harpold, MBA 06. Thank you, George, for clarifying you were Greek. I was thinking Irish, but I appreciate you cleared that up early. I've spent a lot of time in the retirement industry in my job, so I think a lot about workers, savings, et cetera. So I'd like to turn the conversation to wages. We hear a lot in the news about wage growth. Real wage growth in this country has been fairly stagnant for most Americans for many years. And I'd just be curious, obviously a lot of the demand and supply of jobs drives that, which has not been in the workers' favor until maybe recently with that job market change. So it ties into how do we prepare workers, but just can you talk about wage pressures, what you see, companies, and what would spur real wage growth in this country that I think would then drive growth and innovation further?
Robin, sure.
So people forget that we had a very big recession in 2008. And here we are 2015, and the labor market really has not recovered yet, but it is recovering. I mean, Walmart just announced that they were going to, raise the wages of their workers when they are a low-cost operation. I mean, their whole business model is do it cheaper, and they are going to raise wages. And that is the canary that's telling you that the labor market is tightening. And so it's taken us forever to get out of this recession, but we are coming out and the labor market is recovering and there is an increase in demand for workers, and that will put upward pressure on wages.
Scott?
So I guess on this one I'm a little more pessimistic, because I actually think that going back, if you look at the data, go back to about 2000, you see a big bifurcation in the labor market between young and small companies and large and older companies. And what used to happen is that the wage growth and benefits and everything tended to align between the two groups. And at about 2000, you saw a shift. So what we've had, if you take the numbers apart, wage growth is rising, benefits are rising in large and more established businesses. Where there isn't wage growth is in the smaller and newer businesses. And we actually see in real terms wages dropping. And part of the reason is that the big shift is that small and young businesses are not hiring employees for their operations the way they used to. There's a big movement towards contract labor among the small businesses. And I think that as long as we're seeing small businesses operating under a different model, that's keeping the overall average wage growth and benefit growth down. But we've seen this bifurcation. What's confusing and difficult to understand is it's not just the result of recession. It predates the recession, so it seems like a longer-term trend, largely driven by a lot more entrepreneurial activity in the absence of needing to hire, or hiring far fewer people than businesses in the past would have hired.
I actually think there's a statistical aberration in your assumption that real wages haven't grown. I spent some time reading economists' research papers on comparing the 60s to the late 90s. And one of the observations was that because this country brings in 4 to 6 million legal immigrants a year and 4 to 8 illegal or non-documented immigrants every year, we tend to really expand the workforce. As a child of immigrants, I know what that's like. The thing is that a lot of the immigrants, unlike the occasional burst of doctors from the former Soviet bloc countries, most of the immigrants are lower skilled. And they move into either creating small businesses, in my family's case, a lot of small restaurants, or if they're, depending on where they are, cleaners or other small businesses. When the economists separated out people who were born in the US versus immigrants, real wage growth has been happening. And the gap between the bottom 20% and the top 20% of the wage earners has actually decreased over those from the 60s to the 90s. So one of the things I think that complicates the notion of real wage growth, if you take an overall average, is I don't think it correctly accounts for small businesses and the fact that the small businesses very often are the engine of opportunity. That a lot of people are coming because they can start that way, not that they'll end up that way.
I want to mention that wage growth is very strongly correlated with productivity. In the Weatherhead School, we cannot raise people's salaries, but we can make people more productive. And by learning more tools, providing more, being more effective in the operations that your employer wants you to do, will increase the company profits. Your engagements will make you more important to the company, and therefore your wage could increase. And this is actually what we are finding for most of our students.
I want to also acknowledge that Sam has a curious mind. He's not only curious about wages, but he wants to know, who should I keep in my fantasy football team for next year? This is a burning question. Does anybody want to take that one?
Dr. Boyatsis.
Boyatsis is going to take that one.
I will not play.
Ankle injury, right?
So I think we'll cover that one at the reception, Sam, if it's okay with you. All right? Sounds good. I know there was a question over here. Isaac, yes.
I think this question is mostly for Scott Shane, but anyone jump in. So if I'm an aspiring entrepreneur, what advice would you have if I'm struggling between raising funding and getting a product? So in other words, I want to have a product and I want to have investors, but they want to see a product. But I need funding in order to get a product. And so what advice would you have in terms of how do you raise funding when you're an aspiring entrepreneur trying to raise, either through crowdfunding or some source? How do you manage getting through that dichotomy?
All right, well, so let me start by saying I'm really glad that you didn't put me on the spot, which is, should you go get an MBA or not? Because then I don't have to answer that one. But what people normally talk about is that there's a term called ham and egging, which is that what you really are trying to do is bring two parties together at the same time. You're trying to convince investors that you're making progress on the product at the same time as you're trying to convince customers and other stakeholders that you're making progress on the investment side, so things come together. Now, this is a lot of what it takes to be a good entrepreneur, is having a vision for the future and telling people a story about a path that's going to get you there, so both sides will believe that, so that it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you can't pull that off, and then you're absolutely, bottom line, forced to make a choice between the two, the product should always come first before the funding, because if you have a product and the product is viable, it will attract interest from somewhere. You might be able to get money from customers. You might be able to borrow. You might be able to get money from asset-based lenders. You might be able to find something. But if you just got money and you have nothing that you've done with it, you're going to have more trouble. But the ham and egging strategy is really the ideal one to follow.
And the issue that you're talking about, Scott, of being able to come up with a compelling vision and tell the story in an influential way requires a set of competencies that we today call social intelligence. That you can be the biggest technical wizard in the world, but if you don't have the ability to get other people excited about the idea, the business isn't going to happen. So one of the things that we're doing here at Weatherhead, we've been doing since 1990, is the lead course that Ellen's going to give you a little taste of, some intellectual tapas tomorrow morning, is distinctive. And I wanted to mention this because the leadership aspect is the one where most MBA programs fail. Most of the above average MBA programs, because I did these studies for the group that accredits business schools, help you improve over the 2 years about 2% on your emotional and social intelligence, which is not a substitute for technical ability, but if you don't have it, you're going to always be mediocre. Ours kicks you up about 65, 67% in the first 2 years, and it levels off at about a 50% improvement in your behavior 7 years out. That is not just happenstance. That is actually a pedagogical issue.
I just have to add a small data point to this. Is absolutely the case. So I do a lot of work with angel groups, and we've done these small studies on when people are pitching to angel investors, how they get funding. When you look at a set of factors, right, and people are thinking, oh, what does the business plan say? What's the market look like? All these things. Number one predictor in the probability of getting the opportunity to go to due diligence, which is the next stage that you need when you pitch for funding, turns out to be shaking hands and smiling with the investors when you meet them, right? You know, everybody forgets that these basic social skills influence so much of human behavior that when you want to get funding, you worry about how big's the market. That doesn't matter so much. It's if that guy look like they're trustworthy, and if they don't smile and they won't shake your hand, no way would you give them money.
Scott and I both work in the areas of biology of leadership, although we work on some different sides of it. But and it's amazing how when you stop and think about the human being, we're a whole person. But there are some subtleties. So for example, some of the research we're doing now with fMRIs and all that are showing that every time you get people to go into an analytic mode, so they're going to do things with money, numbers, or that kind of problem solving, which you need if you're going to be a successful leader or manager, you activate the part of the brain called the task positive network. But there's a different network in the brain that's responsible for being open to new ideas. It's called the default mode, which also, by the way, enables you to be open to other people. So you'd notice that you should shake their hands and smile and make eye contact, and moral concerns, by the way. The problem is these two networks suppress each other in the brain. So the dilemma is, if you really want to help a person develop, you want to help them develop both. Most MBA programs only do the task positive network. You know, so in the first semester you get accounting, finance, economics, statistics, and then maybe somebody has a genius that said, well, let's study leadership, and they have you study cases of leadership, which is all this. No wonder in most above average MBA programs, people graduate with less social intelligence than they had when they came in. The antidote is pedagogy, and you heard some of my colleagues talk about that this morning, that if you have a pedagogy in the program that encourages people to do projects, to really work in teams, not just to try to do that efficiently, and to periodically be thinking about the interpersonal and the openness to new ideas, what you're literally doing is training your brain to go back and forth. And we're doing research right now trying to show that the people that are most effective leaders can cycle back and forth in under a second. But that's the kind of thing that pedagogy becomes a key factor in.
I think you should also inquire about the competition that takes place annually where students present ideas and the best one of them gets funded. I don't know the details of that, but we have an event here where new ideas are funded.
What is that called?
The Chuck Ames, it's the business case, business plan competition.
I see it every year, and
What's in a name?
Do we have a dean here? No, we don't have a dean here.
Well, we have several different kinds of competitions on campus, from just the Ames case competition to things that go on from developing products all the way through to the funding of businesses.
And this one's a $25,000 prize.
yeah, we have alums who started companies on the basis of the competition, and they are multi-million-dollar companies now, and they come back and they tell their experience to us.
Mm-hmm. I know I see.
Questions out there?
Yep, we've got a couple. So James, and then we need a microphone here, and I see another microphone coming somewhere around here. So James.
James Domingo, Executive MBA 2006. The panel has talked about the importance of small and medium businesses for job creation and also for innovation. And I've read recently in the Wall Street Journal, the younger generation, the millennials say, are starting businesses at a much lower rate than others. They're not starting business and seeming not to take the risk of entrepreneurship. So I wanted to ask, why do you think that is, and should we be concerned about it, and what should we do about it?
So whether we should be concerned about it depends a lot on what the cause is. And people aren't completely sure which hypothesis is most likely. So we've got one possibility is actually just a shortage of capital. So we have a bunch of people who are young who hit the labor force at a time when things were not good. They were less likely to get jobs, they got lower paying jobs, they've accumulated less capital, and so the willingness to start businesses depends in large part on whether one can get the resources. And it's a lot easier to take your own money than to convince somebody else to give you money. So if a bunch of people who are young don't have capital, they can't start. So that's one hypothesis. Another is a change in attitudes, and this is the one that's a little bit more troubling. And it's troubling from an entrepreneurship perspective, not from a societal perspective. So what we see is younger people less interested in making a lot of money by starting a business. And if you want to have a lot of people starting businesses, you want essentially the kinds of things that Warren Buffett talks about, which is, people being greedy when others are fearful, right? If you have that, then you get the entrepreneurs that are out there. What we see in a lot of the data, these surveys, for example, of college freshmen every year, is people more motivated by other choices. Now that might be great for society, that they're more motivated to be, say, a good parent than they are to make a lot of money starting businesses, but it has the adverse effect on the economy of fewer people starting businesses, even if we're all better off because we're all better parents.
Microphone over here, yes.
Hello, my name is Jim.
Hi, Jim.
In less than 60 days, the Apple Watch will be available to the masses. My question to the panel is the Apple Watch and other wearable devices the next technological disruption, or is it just a flash in the pan? And as a follow-up, implications of wearables in the healthcare market. Thank you.
Who would like to take that one?
Well, a lot of it's built on, maybe you should do it, George, but a lot of it's built around healthcare apps that aren't there yet. So one of the speculations is it's not going to do as well right off out of the box until the app makers start doing stuff. There's going to be a lot of things about it. Ultimately, wearable devices, I think, are going to be important. There's just no question they have to be. It's just not clear how. Speculation is this may be built more in Apple's other product lines. So my iPhone will be more useful. There'll be other sorts of things out there. But I bought a Newton. Does anybody remember Newton? That was way before the iPad. It was a total bust. Apple made it. I bought it because I buy everything they make, and it was terrible. So will it hit? I don't know. I think it's probably a good bet, but not as big as what it might be otherwise.
I'm also an Apple junkie, but and I think it is a technological innovation. I don't think that it will be one of the major technological innovations of our decade. I think the things that are happening with the driverless car might change our life dramatically. Imagine how many hours we spend in our cars. Not in my case, because I live 5 minutes from Cage.
Drive a car like that? Is that what you're saying?
No. These driverless cars where people will go in and they're going to have 2 hours of productive time while they were driving before. This can change dramatically the productivity of in our economy. I think our health will be affected a lot by wearable devices,
And that's where I would chime in. I don't have it right now, but several years ago, I bought a Jawbone. I got the Nike Band for my wife, my son. Most of our friends have one or the other, or the Fitbit or whatever. And I've got to say that in the first 8 months of wearing it, it significantly helped me change my sleep patterns. Because I'm in Europe every month, and I'm on planes a lot, and I suffer phenomenal jet lag all the time. But because of that biometric device, I was able to monitor my sleep patterns and adjust my behavior. I think that as people think about being healthy, they want more data. And I think whether it's the watch or not, I think that we're going to get a lot more of that. The next big leap will not be making it smaller. The next big leap will be somehow tying into some biometric sensing that tells you about caloric and protein intake. Because right now, nutrition is a big obstacle for us in terms of living healthy. So I think something in that realm is going to be really large. Just like in the neurological disorder area, we are going to see a point in which most people have electrodes implanted that help to regulate. We don't think much about pacemakers these days. Those are kind of de rigueur. Well, in no time at all, deep brain stimulation will be a part of keeping us healthy if we have certain other neural disorders.
Just think about when you could have those implanted in the professors' brains and they were going on, and you could push the button and it would cut them off. That'd be fantastic.
Yeah.
The mute button.
Is that on the test? I think these innovations will happen over time, gradually. 50%, I read 50% of the people who get heart attack for first time, they didn't know it. Well, if you have a wearable device, you will know it. My book, I devoted to a 30-year-old friend of mine who died from aneurysm. He woke up that morning, a minute later, he was dead. Well, maybe 20 years from now, you get an aneurysm, you will know right away. Someone will beep you. So I think these advances will happen slowly, and they will be dramatic to us in our healthcare, because if that device saves your life once, it paid for itself for the rest of your life, right? But yeah.
Sorry, I think another big, the MOOCs. I mean, the reason I used to hate online learning with a passion, but I felt like we have to, as professors, innovate, and we have to experiment. Innovate assumes it works. We have to experiment. One of the things I've learned in the past 2 years is that psychology has been telling us for 15 years that people learn the most efficiently in 15 to 20-minute bursts. That if you try to study more than 20 minutes in a row, you're actually efficient, your retention rate is dropping dramatically. The fact that most MOOCs, the videos, tend to be about 10 minutes long, I don't think is just happenstance. And when I hear from thousands of these students, this was so great, I went out for a coffee, and instead of my usual thing of looking at the newspaper and getting depressed, I watched the video and I went back to work and I was feeling juiced. Or I put my kids to bed and I had about 30 minutes. Instead of watching something on TV, I watched a video and then wrote on part of the discussion. That change in technology with the iPads and computers and all that, married with the change in the technology on education, is making this anywhere, anytime approach to learning dramatically different. Now, nobody's figured out how to make money on it yet, but I'm answering your question about will technology change parts of our lives. I think it is already, and I think it will continue.
So we have time just for one more comment or question, and then we're going to continue this at a reception. So don't worry if we have not gotten to your question. I think, do we have a comment or question from one of our alums? Gentlemen, did
No, I was just going to chime in on the whole thing around wearables. A lot of my clients are looking at wearables, and I think around the healthcare question, I think the interesting thing is that I would agree with the panel there that I don't know if I would say wearables are going to be totally disruptive from a healthcare perspective. That said, I would say that a lot of my clients today are looking at other types of business models and data models around wearables where they can begin to somehow create value for users as well as monetize that. For example, if I think about cable companies and telecommunications companies, they're already thinking about how can I get in the game of, for example, say healthcare through wearables or through other technologies. I look at the consumer electronics manufacturers themselves. They're thinking about it from a hardware perspective, but they're also thinking about how do I create that recurring relationship with my consumers that I don't have today, because you buy a piece of hardware and you pay me today and I don't have a relationship with you beyond that store transaction. So there's a lot of other models that I think you'll see around wearables, whereas healthcare might not be the disruptive angle for them, but there may be other information-based services that are built around them.
But that can backfire. I mean, a few years ago, my wife was talking about doing something more interesting for our dinner parties, so I bought her a couple books on Amazon on napkin folding. And for 2 years after that, I kept getting recommendations from Amazon for books on knitting, scrapbooking, and other kinds of crafts. Anyway, you had a question?
Yes, right over here.
Hello?
Okay. There you go.
So for this whole entire presentation, we've kind of come back towards leadership and understanding how to lead people. My personal view is that managing people is completely separate than leading people. And I feel like Case does a good job of understanding how to manage, then to lead. But I was just wondering what your personal leadership style is. I know Norhaus and Cotter both have leadership styles that they express, but you guys are all brilliant. So I was wondering, and you don't get to the position that you are in without having leadership. So I was wondering what your personal leadership was, and if you had any ideas for us on how to lead others going forward.
Great question to help us wrap up this part. Who would like to start?
I think Richard.
I can do 8 hours on it, so let me let my colleagues
I was going to let him
answer
go
it.
last.
You have 8 seconds.
Every second that I take, he will blame me for it.
Okay, so nobody else is going to take it, so I'll take it. First of all, your premise that leadership and management are different is incorrect. The data, and I've been studying this since 1970, the data is very clear and very consistent in 94 countries of the world, large, medium, and small businesses, for-profit and not-for-profit. The key is when you say, what is the nature of effective management? What's the nature of effective leadership? And because people who are effective tend to be 5 to 7% of the distribution of people in those jobs. That's all. 80% of the people in management aren't adding value. 80% of the people in leadership aren't adding value. And that's an empirical description. But when you look at effective managers and effective leaders, they actually show most of the same behaviors. And among them is the issue that I would say, the most important thing for me personally, is can I help somebody else get excited about something? You know, because if I can't ring your chimes, if I can't get you curious about something, it's going nowhere. You're not going to, if you're working with me on a project, you're not going to want to spend your discretionary time unless you are excited. Engaged is another word sometimes people use. So it's that, and that's not just a rational position you come to. It's also deeply emotional.
And this is very relevant to your search. I say during your life, you will do many things you can't even imagine. You might want to play piano. I dance salsa. I run. All the things that you do, the guy who trains you needs to be dying for what he's doing. Because if all he gives you is his passion, your life has changed once and for all. And since you are looking for an MBA school, suppose that you go to the best school and you never get engaged. Or you go to the lowest school and 3 of the instructors make you so excited it becomes part of your DNA. They have transformed you forever.
On that note, that's a perfect place for us to pause, right? Not necessarily to stop, because this is a continuation for us and for us to get to know you and you to get to know our faculty team. So what we're going to be doing now is we're going to be moving to a reception for the next 45 minutes or so. So as I mentioned a moment ago, if a question just came up or you had one and we didn't get to it, we're sorry that we weren't able to do so, but please come talk to all of us at the reception and later tonight. And of course, I'm going to have a chance to be with you in the morning as well.
Which is the reception that's serving the Bloody Marys?
Yeah, the one right outside, I think, yes. So please join me in thanking our faculty for being here. Thank you, everybody. And I wanted to thank you for being so engaged and for the provocative questions. One of the things that really rings our chimes in our kind of work is being able to have really stimulating, engaging conversations. So thank you for helping us to achieve that together, because when we do that, all of us learn. So we raise the collective learning for the entire group. So on that note, let's continue it. We'll step right outside to the reception, and we'll see you then. Thank you to our alums as well. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us.